1. The Euston Arch. It stood like a Roman sentinel at the gateway to London's first intercity terminal. Built in 1837, the Euston Arch was a towering sandstone monument inspired by classical antiquity. Imposing, elegant, and entirely unnecessary, but it captured the spirit of the age, proud, industrial, and unafraid to dream big. For over a century, it greeted millions of passengers with its massive columns. For children, it was the first thing they saw on trips to London. For soldiers leaving for war, it was the last piece of home they passed. Then came 1962. In a decision that still enrages Londoners, the British Transport Commission ordered it demolished to make way for a redesigned station. The stones weren't preserved in a museum. They were dumped in the River Lee. Today, a dull road leads to Euston Station, and the arch exists only in faded photographs and the fury of those who never wanted it lost. 2nd, Wembley's Twin Towers. Ask someone to picture Wembley today and they'll likely think of the modern arch. But for decades, Wembley meant the Twin Towers. Iconic, white, majestic, opened in 1923 and built in just 300 days. They stood as proud sentinels for everything from World Cup finals to Live Aid. For many, the sight of those towers on TV was as important as the match itself. In 2003, they were demolished to make way for the ultra-modern version we know today. The new stadium may be more advanced, but something intangible was lost. The Twin Towers weren't just architecture, they were emotion, memory, presence. Fans still talk about walking up Wembley Way and seeing them appear in the distance. Since they vanished, Wembley has never felt quite the same. 3. The Crystal Palace. Originally built for the Great Exhibition of 1851, the Crystal Palace was a wonder of its time, a cathedral of glass and iron showcasing industry, art, and invention. After the exhibition, it was moved to Sydenham and expanded, becoming a landmark visited by millions. Families would spend entire days wandering its endless halls, staring up at giant glass ceilings and strange machines. But in 1936, a fire reduced it to rubble. Flames lit up the sky as crowds gathered, watching helplessly. Some said you could see the glow from miles away. For Londoners, it felt like losing the beating heart of Victorian ambition overnight. Only stone remnants remain in the park today. The palace that once represented confidence and optimism was gone in a single night. 4. The Great Wheel. Before the London Eye ever turned, there was another giant watching over the city. The Great Wheel, built for the 1900 Empire Exhibition, stood 308 feet tall and carried over 1,000 passengers at once. For children, it was pure magic, the chance to rise above the rooftops and see London like never before. It was inspired by Chicago's Ferris wheel, but to British visitors, it felt like a vision of the future. By 1920, it was dismantled and scrapped. Its purpose, pure entertainment, had become too costly to maintain. Today, not a trace remains, and yet its spirit lingers. Every time a capsule of the London Eye makes its slow climb, it's echoing the boldness of the Great Wheel. 5. The Festival of Britain, Skylon and Dome of Discovery. In 1951, the South Bank became a futuristic playground. The Festival of Britain gave London two unforgettable icons. The Skylon was a needle-shaped tower that seemed to float in mid-air, defying gravity. Next to it stood the Dome of Discovery, the largest dome in the world at the time, filled with exhibits about science, space, and the future. For a brief moment, it felt like Britain was ready to dream big again after the hardships of war. Children craned their necks to see the Skylon. Families queued to explore the dome. But just a year later, Winston Churchill ordered them removed. Some said it was politics, others practicality. By 1952, both were gone. The skylon scrapped, the dome demolished, their site turned into little more than a car park. What should have been symbols of optimism became just another memory. 6. The Egyptian Hall. In the heart of Piccadilly once stood a building that looked more at home beside the Nile than on London streets. Egyptian Hall, built in 1812, was one of the first structures in England to embrace Egyptian revival style. Its facade was dramatic, exotic, and unlike anything else in the city. Inside, it hosted exhibitions of curiosities, art, and artifacts from around the world. By 1905, it was gone, demolished to make way for offices and shops. Today, near its old location, you'll find a Starbucks. From a temple of mystery to a temple of caffeine. The transformation speaks volumes about what London chooses to keep and what it's willing to sacrifice in the name of progress. 7. Old London Bridge. The nursery rhyme says it's falling down, and in the 1960s, it really did. The famous 1831 London Bridge had become too weak for modern traffic, but instead of demolishing it outright, the city sold it. Piece by piece, it was dismantled and shipped to Arizona, where it was rebuilt over a man-made lake. For Londoners, it was surreal. The bridge that had carried generations across the Thames was suddenly thousands of miles away, standing in the desert. Tourists still visit it today, but for those who grew up in London, the idea that their bridge was sold to America feels almost absurd. It's one of the strangest chapters in the city's history, proof that even the most familiar landmark can vanish if someone writes the right check. 8. Limehouse Chinatown. Before Soho, there was Limehouse. Along the docks in the East End, Chinese sailors and traders built tea houses, laundries, and apothecaries. By the late 19th century, Limehouse had a thriving Chinatown. Mysterious, often misrepresented, but a vital part of the city's diversity. World War II bombing and post-war redevelopment destroyed much of the area. By the 1950s, most of its community had moved to Soho. The old streets were rebuilt, the signs taken down, and an entire chapter of cultural history quietly erased. Walk those streets today and you'd never know a Chinatown once stood there. 9. Holland House. Near Kensington High Street once stood Holland House, a grand mansion from 1605. For centuries it hosted salons, parties, and political debates. Its ivy-clad walls echoed with the voices of prime ministers, poets, and aristocrats. It was a slice of English refinement in the heart of the city, but in 1940, bombs fell. 22 direct hits left the house a hollow ruin. Only fragments survived, and they stand to this day in Holland Park as a ghost of what was lost. For visitors, the ruins are atmospheric, but for those who remember the house in its glory, it's a reminder of war's permanent scars. 10. The Astoria. Music pulsed through its walls. From its days as a cinema in the 1920s to becoming one of London's best-known concert venues, the Astoria hosted everyone from the Rolling Stones to Radiohead. For fans, it wasn't just a building, it was a place where lives changed. People still remember sweaty gigs, sticky carpets, and the sheer energy of its crowds. In 2009, it was demolished to make way for Crossrail, a palace of sound replaced by transport infrastructure. For many, it wasn't just a demolition, it was an erasure of culture. Walk past the site today and you'd never know what once stood there. 11th Wych Street. Tucked between the Strand and Lincoln's Inn Fields, Wych Street was a crooked row of old Tudor and Elizabethan houses. Its leaning timbers and narrow lanes looked like a portal to Shakespearean London. Imperfect, eerie, enchanting. But in 1901, it was wiped off the map. The city wanted wide boulevards, so Wych Street was demolished to make way for Kingsway. in trying to modernize, London buried its own theatrical past. Today, thousands walk those streets, unaware they're treading on ground once alive with history and ghost stories. Cities evolve, streets change, and sometimes entire landmarks vanish without a sound, not destroyed by nature, but erased by progress, politics, or neglect. London is a city that remembers through shadows and echoes. The Euston Arch, Wembley's Twin Towers, the Crystal Palace, Old London Bridge, all gone, yet alive in memory. Which of these losses do you wish London had preserved? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that keep the past alive. Because behind every demolished wall and vanished dome, there's a story still waiting to be told.